So now we've buried the Queen, why stop there? Why not bury the entire monarchy? That may seem harsh, but hear me out. The monarchy is not just a symbol of inequality, it actively upholds it. King Charles's mum dies, he inherits 400 million and he pays 0 inheritance tax. If your mum dies, you pay 40%. And I bet you don't have 20 billion worth of assets to back you up. The Crown Estate is worth between 15 and 30 billion pounds, while 4 million children live in poverty. And we've got more food banks than branches of McDonald's. And where did they get their vast wealth? Violence, imperialism, colonialism. The British monarchy is built on violence. And I say this as a former British soldier. It's time to take the opportunity to throw the monarchy on the scrap heap of history where it belongs. I'm Joe Glenton, journalist, author, former soldier, and traitor to the Crown. Probably before I was ever really political, I was from the mind of a child, kind of a Republican. It never really made sense. That said, I am, in a much more literal sense than many people, an actual traitor to the Crown. Of course, I signed an oath to the Queen many years ago when I joined the military. But even then, I didn't really buy into it. I was never a Queen and country kind of person. This is a group of people who basically came to power, or their ancestors came to power, because they were more violent, more vicious, more sneaky than another group of people who were also vying for power, and they have managed to hold on to power. People talk about how it's a constitutional monarchy, it's not a tyranny, but it is a tyranny, but it's a quiet tyranny, and it's a tyranny we can kind of tolerate because it's wrapped in pageantry and this kind of shroud of democracy. I always remember the words of Peter Oborne in his book about the Chilcot Inquiry, and he talks about Britain as a modern state with a medieval core, the Privy Council and things like that. And I think when you start to scratch the surface, you can see all the times that the monarchy, in my lifetime, has intervened in politics. Whether it's the Queen didn't want black household servants, they wanted to be exempt from particular laws relating to climate change, or Prince Charles's, now King Charles's, famous spider letters in his scratchy handwriting, trying to influence government on particular issues. Charles was the most senior royal to act as a kind of frontman for the arms trade. He's not the only one. Prince Andrew was a frontman for the arms trade, a man who has links to Epstein, the late paedophile, who was bailed out with 12 million of our money. Endless stories about them storing their money in tax havens. You look at the massive amounts of wealth and land they own. You look at their continued and increasingly unwanted lording over the former colonies. These are massively powerful people. And I think just on that basis, you should be critical of the monarchy. And again, if they have no power, if they're just symbolic, then why was the whole country in effect locked down and certainly locked to a particular kind of media coverage? Why was it force-fed? So many journalists, who I'm sure on any other topic probably are capable of impartiality, just turned into stenographers for the monarchy. There is a line to be drawn between grieving, even a national grieving process over a public figure, and just being a boot-licking sycophant. And that is how a lot of senior journalists in the mainstream media came across. There was no space whatsoever for anything except the top-down kind of narrative. First of all, republicanism is a legitimate viewpoint, and it is legitimate to express it at any time. And I don't care if it's the Queen's funeral or the King's coronation. It is a long and grand tradition in this country, because so much of what we are concerned with, the commons, landlords, unaccountable power, runs straight through the monarchy. And yet there's this kind of baked-in deference to power which runs all the way through British politics, the whole spectrum, which stops us asking those questions when they need to be asked.
Why are you so subservient to someone you don't even know?
Sod off. Go away. Don't call me again. I can't stand you. You disgust me.
The right wing are and it's been evident in the last week or so, the kings of cancel culture. Not a word can be uttered which is critical of the Queen or the monarchy. And it's not to say there are problems on the liberal left and the further left, but certainly the right love the idea of unaccountable authority. It's part of their ideology. Every commentator going was virtue signalling for the last 10 days or so. What we've just seen is like a nuclear state-mandated mass virtue signal. What was the cue if not a mass virtue signal? David Beckham, God bless him, had queued up, but Holly and Phil had pushed in, and all of the people commenting on it completely ignored in their conversation about equality and privilege that they were all queuing up to see the coffin of a 96-year-old billionaire who had inherited by accident of birth gigantic power in this country. And I think we can do better than that. People are down in the queue saying they're happy to see the human respect to people, wanting to be part of history. It is a historic moment, but maybe not in the way that most people whose view is kind of obscured by a weird sycophantic love of the monarchy would understand, the British state is being remade before our eyes. I think that's the historical aspect. What we're seeing is the kind of mythologies of British identity being reformed and remoulded. There's been an attempt to de-link the royals from colonialism, the Queen particularly. How much land is owned around the world by the monarchy? You have to explain why they own billions of acres of land across the world. The monarchy is an institution of violence. It's built around violence, our colonial history and our imperial history. The Queen oversaw the last phase of the British Empire and was centrally involved in that. And even more recently, the royal prerogative has been exercised to enforce parts of the colonial settlement. In particular, the Chagos Islanders, Diego Garcia, the Privy Council ruled that they couldn't return to their homeland. And then you can just look at the kind of accoutrements the monarch has on their person when they're in their costume of state. Diamonds from this former colony, gold from this former colony, opals from another former colony, sapphires from somewhere else. They are absolutely centrally involved in colonialism and were from the very beginning, and they continue to be when they go and tour around hedonistically, getting carried around on racks by the islanders in some former part of the empire. It's absolutely central to their identity. As I've said, it embodies inequality. It's not just a symbol of inequality, it is the ultimate expression. People who God decided could be in charge, that's literally the terms we're speaking in here. And we have to argue with that. One argument that's levelled against Republicans is that if we had a president, we'd have a Trump, we'd have this kind of corporate sponsored demagogue, as if Liz Truss isn't that already, as if Boris Johnson isn't that already, as if the monarchy isn't that already, as if Prince Charles isn't a front man for arms firms, as if the Queen, even though she maybe didn't publicly do that stuff, didn't tacitly let it happen, tacitly endorse it. And it's also a question about the kind of society you want to have. A lot of monarchists come to you and go, are you a Republican, so you'd want a president? That would be rubbish. And it's like, no, I'm not trying to replace what we have now with some other kind of crap capitalist society, guys. I want a completely different kind of society, which is much more communal and is based on sharing things. I mean, if I had just inherited billions and billions of pounds, massive amounts of land, gigantic amounts of privilege, at the point when the country I claim to serve is about to plunge into an energy crisis, is in the midst of an escalating cost of living crisis, I would probably put my hand in my pocket and cough up and pay for some things. And the fact that they have not, and I suspect will not, probably tells you a lot. And you should think about that, because these people aren't like you. They believe they are appointed by God or their genes to rule over you. And I think this is exactly the time, amid all those colliding crises, to start thinking about that. All the questions which concern people who are interested in justice and equality, they all at some point run smack bang through the middle of the British monarchy, and we have to take it into account. We can't just circumvent it or shy away from it, or because one of them's died, take our foot off the gas, because that is precisely the time to critique rather than just allowing the kind of accession to roll through. People are literally starving. Pensioners will die this winter because they can't heat their homes. And I think it should really bring that into relief. But of course, there is a problem. The British disease is deference to power. And it hasn't always been like that. We have got rid of a king once in this country, and they called it the first 2 years of freedom. And it's something that we should not try and recreate. We're not doing cosplay, but it's something we should consider. What could the world look like? What could Britain look like without this mafia family at its head? As we've seen in the last few days, an independent media, which is critical and free thinking, is more important than ever. So if you want a media that isn't sycophantic and doesn't spend days and days doing coverage of royal coffins, support Double Down News on Patreon. People all over the land are preparing for the King's coronation, and the King himself is rubbing his chubby little fingers with glee. I'm here to tell you, as a former British soldier, why the King must fall. Of all the institutions in this land, this is the one which we should be most critical of. These are gangsters, they're the Peaky Blinders, they're the Sopranos, they're the most vicious of the vicious, and that's how they found their way into power. And all the bunting and all the quiches and all the coronation chicken in the world cannot obscure that. They are the biggest gangsters of them all. £100 million for the coronation of a man who was unpopular even before he became king. At the same time, people who work on the trains, teachers, doctors, nurses, having to fight for a pittance, for a tiny pay rise, just so they can afford their rent and don't have to go to a food bank. The argument's bizarre to me because people say the royals bring in money, the royals bring in money. But it's not that the royals are kind of in a glass case in Buckingham Palace and you can just wander around and feed them. I can't on camera advocate for us to use the French model because I'd get in lots of trouble. But we could probably, put them in a council house or something, tell them to get a proper job, tell them to start working for a living. There's absolutely a correlation between the French getting rid of the royal family and just having better lives, living longer. They have great hair, they have incredible food, they drive really fast, they're really sexy, they look really cool, drinking tiny coffees and chain smoking and whispering in French. And look at us, we're just this bunch of bumbling peasants who are still sucking up to this family of inbred morons. There is an argument put by people who are apologists for this thuggish clan who squat above us, taking all our money and land, who say that the Windsors are a sign, an emblem of order and of continuity. And they're not wrong, but not in the way that they think. What they represent is a continuity of inequality, of poverty, of unfairness, of unaccountable power, who pays no tax, but at the same time, they're always framed in terms of service, like they actually do anything except turn up for public events and cut ribbons. Not in terms of what they take, which is vast. They claw out of society with their grubby fat fingers, Charles. That is the real face of royal leadership, that they're just grimy tax dodgers at the end of the day, just like all these other big businesses and institutions. As a former soldier and the nation's favourite disgrace to Queen and country, a traitor to the crown, it's always interested me, this relationship between the army and the monarchy. In my book, I talked about waltzing, people who pretend to be soldiers, who wear medals they're not entitled to wear uniforms they're not entitled to wear. Those people get a lot of ire from the veterans community, and correctly so, arguably, but there are no bigger Walter Mitties than the royal family, who are the heads of various regiments and rock up in their uniforms, chat shit to the squaddies, like they're getting in touch with the common man, never having served in those regiments for the most part. And it's this kind of advanced case of military cosplay. It's always kind of bothered me that these people who are the heads of regiments and the heads of the military itself are basically a bunch of kind of LARPers. One of the royal family's many jobs is kind of as the marketing wing for various arms firms, for your BAEs and your Lockheeds and your Raytheons, and you see them cutting around, sometimes in military uniform, sometimes in local dress, this weird hedonistic cosplay. Don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but they're really into like going around, hanging out with dictators, putting on like Arab headscarves and Arab dress, for example, snuggling up to these people. But underpinning that, they're trying to flog weapons, flog missiles, flog all kinds of arms equipment to these countries, and that has long been their role. That's the case for Charles, it's also the case for Andrew. The true nature of monarchy is kind of concealed in a way which in those countries it isn't. It's raw power and absolutely dictatorial, whereas in Britain we have this kind of veil, this idea of a constitutional monarchy with some limits, and they can't do the things that they used to be able to do, or perhaps would want to, because we know some of these people are pretty unhinged. But it's interesting when you look at the parallels. Our green-fingered, well-branded king is actually best pals with some of the most brutal, authoritarian, tyrannical monarchs in the world. There is a proud culture of dissent against monarchy in culture, in our culture, and a good example of that is Monty Python railing against the idea of monarchy. The Sex Pistols, who did a particular great song about the Queen. I think it's waned, and I think that's sad, and I do wonder if it's because so much of culture, so much of music, so much of the arts has become an increasingly middle and upper class field, and it's much nearer to power. A lot of that anti-monarchist stuff, particularly with the Sex Pistols, came from an angry, bottom-up working class, a place of dissent and outrage, and there's an urge to mock power, which I think is one of the really redeeming things about the British, that we do and always have to some degree mocked power. We've lampooned kings, we've taken the piss out of queens. There's a long tradition of that, but I feel it's probably receded. Where are the artists who will mock power, challenging the common sense of society?
God save the Queen, the fascist regime.
Not all King Charleses have had an easy run in this country. One was beheaded in the wake of the English Civil War. Two armies, the Army of Parliament, the New Model Army, and the army which supported King Charles, duked it out very bloodily in the 1600s. One of the end results of that was that we had what was called at the time the first 2 years of freedom. The Levellers were a radical movement, a diverse and radical movement. They literally wanted to level society. They wanted to make things more equal. And they cross-pollinated with radicals in the ranks of the New Model Army. The New Model Army was a fascinating beast. It unionised itself, and the various regiments started to elect agitators or agents who were kind of like trade union reps. The arguments those two organisations put, the agitators and the Levellers, when they cross-pollinated, were fascinatingly sophisticated arguments about really fundamental things. Colonel Rainsborough, one of my heroes, who in the Putney debates clashed with Cromwell, Rainsborough said, "The poorest he in England hath a life to live as the greatest he." And it was an argument for the vote. In the end, the king was executed and Cromwell rose to power and became, in his own sense, a tyrant and crushed by force the democratic forces within the New Model Army. But nevertheless, the legacy, the spirit of those people endures. And there's probably a reason that that stuff isn't taught in schools. We learn about Henry VIII, we learn about how we were the good guys in the First and Second World War in a very unnuanced and uncomplicated way. But I think that history is particularly important because every serious country talks about their revolution. If you go to France, all they talk about is their revolution, liberty and fraternity and so on. The Americans will never shut up about their revolution, equality between men and so on and so on. However loosely applied they were at the time, the underpinning values are correct, I think. And we don't talk about our revolution here. But our revolution was the first revolution of that kind. It's a vital bit of a rich and interesting part of our history. And the centerpiece of that history is the idea of a republic and of a higher degree of equality than was available at that time. These are big questions which mattered then, and people spoke about them then, and they matter now, and we should speak about them now. If you look at the examples of history, why would you want to be a kind of meek and submissive peasant when you can be a raucous, roguish highwayman figure, or rather than this kind of meek tugging of the forelock, stout, cretinous yeoman? I think it speaks to a lack of political imagination and probably a lack of political understanding of what the monarchy is. They own vast amounts of beautiful countrysides that we should all be allowed to walk around on. It's ours. It's ours by right, and it goes back a long way. The idea that you would steal from the rich and give to the poor has value. Is it really theft if you're taking it back from thieves? The greatest thieves of all are the gangster family of Britain, the Windsor Mafia. I have great faith in the democratic impulses and the egalitarian impulses of the younger generation coming through. And polls do seem to suggest that a lot of people, A, don't really care about the coronation, and particularly that young people would like to see an elected head of state. And I think that is something to be encouraged. Even monarchists, when they really ask themselves, they may gush about it and laud it and talk about stability and order, but I think inside everyone, anyone with any critical facility can look at that institution and go, there is something fundamentally wrong there. And we have in this country a long, proud, volatile, rich history of republicanism, of anti-monarchism. And we need, next time we get rid of them, not to keep it at 2 years, but make it a permanent affair. You saw the press coverage around the Queen's funeral. You can imagine what it's going to be like around the King's coronation. More than ever, it's important that there is an independent media that is not afraid to call out the monarchy. Support Double Down News on Patreon.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Last word, sir.
Good evening.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Password, sir.
Fidelity.
Thank you, sir.
Please, come forward.
Very successful. Has worked in and out of the media. Great writer. You,
The healthcare.
no, this Brexit thing.
About the early difficult years in the relationship between Herzl and the Rothschild family. So please bear with me for a bit of history.
Please, come forward.
That's like pouring perfume on a pig.
All right, suppose we settle down. That's far enough. Where'd you get those glasses?
Tooth fairy.
I'll bet.
You got him. Think you saw shaving this morning?
You look as shitty to us as we do to you.
Impossible.
It would be easier if we don't have to splatter your brains.
Well, my career in law enforcement, I actually joined the Brotherhood of Freemasons.
Yeah, how'd you get into that?
Man, you know, a lot of cops are involved with that.
Really?
Oh yeah. It is. It's a thing that I'm not saying you must do, but 95% of them do. You know what I mean?
Now, what's the benefit out of it? Like, what's the main purpose?
Actually,
95.
For me, if you're going to ask me the question, I think it was more like biblical history.
Oh, well, okay.
What intrigued me the most was they talked about King Solomon's temple and the Holy of Holies, and I've always been intrigued by it.
So this actually exists?
Yes, it does. It's the occult. It's nothing to be messing with.
Okay.
I'm gonna tell you straight up.
All right.
And there's 3 phases. The first phase is enter apprentice.
Okay.
Even before you get to that phase, you got to be pretty much spoke about.
Okay.
You know, to be one, you have to ask one. So one of my supervisors, he was a lieutenant, pretty much came up to me and asked me, "Hey, you want to join a club?" And I'm like, "What kind of club is it?" You know what I mean?
Right.
Well, it's a Freemasons. I did my background, on them and did my research, and I've seen a lot of positive things that that came out of doing the research. You know, a lot of them donate money to cancer victims and children's with cancer, and the Shriners, they have their own hospital and so forth. I was in a position where I'm working with juvenile offenders. Well, why not? Why not do something in the outside? You know what I mean? So my lieutenant spoke for me and 2 other of my fellow brothers in blue, and we petitioned for a spot in the Brotherhood, and filled out applications, and they did a background. They do a background on you, see if you're good standing, or else they won't take you.
Wow.
What they do is they take men to make them better. That's what they say. But only God could do that.
Right.
No club could do that for you.
That's right.
So right around 2006, I'm on my 4th year. I'm a 4th or 5th year on the job. I petitioned. It all went pretty good, and they do a house interview.
Okay.
So I had, like 20, 30 people come to my house, and they spoke to my wife because they speak to the females first.
Wow.
I didn't know why, but they usually do that because you're not gonna be around as much when you go into meetings, or you got to do take time off to do work as far as donating, getting money for donations and and so forth. So I didn't see that quite a bit, as far as going out there, doing that type of work first, because you have to go through rituals first. The first phase is the enter apprentice phase. That's phase 1, and you do your rituals. They take you in, and they tie a toe to your ankle, made of
tie a toe?
A toe, yeah, ankle toe. They call it the ankle toe, and it's made out of what do you call it? It's like a harness. It's like a tie. They tie it around your leg, and they raise your pants leg up, and you're there in a suit, and then you go around. You're blindfolded, so you can't really see the actual temple. It's a temple. You got Joaquin and Boaz on one side. The 2 towers, which are the 2 pillars of the Freemasons.
This is like big time.
Oh, it's a ritual.
This is like sacred stuff, right?
Yeah. But see, the way they cookie cut it is that they only get the ones that are like, I would say the ones that are really interested and the ones that are clean cut.
Right.
All right. And I'm going to add the devil to this too.
Okay.
Because when you're in the world, you're of the devil. Your father, the devil, right?
Right.
When you don't have God on your mind at all times, from when you wake up in the morning to when you go to sleep at night, you're of your father, the devil. And I'm just going to say it like that, but I'm going to be bold and honest, Right. I was in the right state of mind then. I had some marital problems, so I felt like this was an outlet for me to get out and have fellowship with other brothers.
Right, because you wasn't getting that with the churches.
I wasn't getting that with the churches back home because, they were preaching prosperity.
Right. Okay.
Give me $1, God gives you 1,000. God doesn't work that way, man. You got to work for, you got to work to eat. So, nah, don't wait for a handout.
So how long did the first phase last?
See, what they do is they bring you into the temple, and they have the secretary which is a male. We're all males. There's no female Masons here. I know in Europe, I think they do, not here. Unless you're an Eastern Star, that's different.
Okay.
But the Freemasons, you got the Blue Lodge, which is composed of all different nationalities and backgrounds of Masons,
Right.
to include different religious sets. Hindu, Muslim, whatever. You could be atheist, they don't care. You could be Satan. You could be a devil worshiper. And they'll bring a devil worshiping Bible right there, Satanic Bible, so you could you take the oath. Yeah, they don't care. See, I didn't know that. Until I started doing more homework on it. What did I get myself into? But
Did you ever get that far?
oh yeah, I became a Master Mason.
Okay.
I mean, the highest you go is 33rd. But
Okay.
even at 32nd, see, from the ranks of 30th to 33, which is 3, that's when they divulge the actual truth to you.
I got you.
You know, which they have you in darkness all those years, and then once you start climbing up the rituals and the phases, and you go up the ranks or degrees,
Right.
we call it. You could go from the 3rd degree to the 32nd degree in a weekend.
Wow.
Oh yeah, you could do it in 2 days. They call that the fast track. But usually to get that high, it takes years. Wow. It takes years, but you could do it the other way. You got to pay some money or talk to whoever.
I heard that some people, if I might be mistaken, but I know some of these rich people, these Hollywood people, they give land, millions of dollars.
Oh yeah. It all depends, because those are called dues, right?
Okay.
And you talking about occultic, satanic individuals that work in Hollywood, reverence, of money, of people of power. I didn't know all that, because when you got scales in your eyes, you can only see so much.
Right.
But when God removes those blinds off your eyes, you start seeing who's who for what they are.
Wow.
And not every Masonic lodge. I mean, they all talk about the same, but everybody's different. Because in order for you to be a Shriner, you got to be a Mason. For you to be a Knights Templar, you got to be a Mason. And the more you go up in that pyramid, and the highest you could go is a Rothschild.
Right.
They're the highest of the highest.
Really?
Yeah, they're the satanic children of Satan.
Wow.
They actually sit on the table, and they have a special chair for Satan right there. And he comes and talks to these family members, and they're the ones that the shaking and bakers, I call it.
Now, this all has to do also with those people who go out into the wood and they burn that wooden owl and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, you talking about the Illuminati?
Illuminati, okay. So
Right.
This has to do with.
Oh yeah, you have to be a Freemason to be there. All the presidents were Freemasons.
Okay.
A small portion weren't, but they were Jesuits. This is the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, even the Pope. They don't. And I'm going to be honest. They don't actually have to do the whole ritual. They have to watch.
Right.
And because of their power and rank within the church,